sort of moving back and forth has made people here very anxious. Some are wondering if really the tactic of the Gaddafi forces was to have some strategic retreat to attract the rebels towards Sirte. That's the place where they do say that Gaddafi forces have a very strong bases, very fortified bases. This is the stronghold of Gaddafi himself, and they do wonder what is going to happen next. Some people here in Benghazi told me, well, all the young people are now gone to the front. There is no one left to protect our city. So certainly a bit of anxiety. Everybody has the feeling that the next 48 hours are going to be key in understanding whether the rebels will be able to make any more advances or whether Sirte will be sort of a deadlock for a while, which for people here would mean a lot of danger coming their way.
You talk about tactics of the government forces, Hoda. I mean, are there any apparent tactics from the rebels there? Because we hear about how they obviously want to take or head to more government-controlled areas.
But people do wonder how come the rebel forces, which are, you know, they're big in numbers, they're big in will, but they're certainly unorganized and they're certainly much less experienced than the government forces. I do wonder how come the rebels had managed to take over city after city after city. Now, when you get closer to Sirte, it is becoming much more difficult. The battles in Ras Lanouf and in Ben Jawad have been much more complicated. And so some people are beginning to wonder whether they got overexcited about their territorial gains over the past few weeks, and whether maybe that was all along the tactic of the government in Tripoli to attract these rebels towards Sirte and then to have a big battle there. I have to say it doesn't really undermine the resolve of the rebels. More and more are taking their weapons and going that way. They're vowing to continue the fight. I think the feeling really at this stage among both the rebels and the government is that there's nothing. Either side have everything to lose if they capitulate. But I have to say people do expect that this is now going to be a prolonged battle to get to Tripoli, to be able to eventually overthrow the regime of Gaddafi. There is an understanding here that it's not going to happen so easily.
Hoda, thank you. Going to leave you there in Benghazi, move over to Brega, get an update from Jackie Rowland on the ground there. Jackie.
Yes, well, as we've been hearing, this is really a lesson in not making predictions about how this fighting is going to pan out. Over the last 48 hours, we saw the rebels making significant advances here in the east. They seem to be pushing forward. They took the town of Ras Lanouf. They appeared to be on the verge of taking the town of Ben Jawad, but then the Gaddafi forces started fighting back. Ben Jawad very much in the control of Gaddafi forces, and the latest that we're hearing is that the rebels may in fact be routed out of Ras Lanouf as well. It would seem as if the pro-Gaddafi forces are drawing a line in the sand. They're making it clear that the rebels are able to advance only so far along the road to Sirte, Gaddafi's hometown, but if they step over that line, then it seems as though the Gaddafi forces are really going to pile in with a lot of firepower to push them back. So at the moment, Ras Lanouf is really the front line at the moment of the fighting between the pro and anti-Gaddafi forces.
How much does that almost psychologically knock back the rebels when you say that the government forces are drawing a line in the sand almost and saying this is as far as you will go, this is as far as we will let you go? Does it knock their resolve, the rebels, at all?
No, I mean, the rebels still are very buoyant. The main problem really, as you can probably hear in the background, is this very undisciplined atmosphere within the rebel camp. It seems that anyone and everyone can turn up here at the Brega checkpoint and say, I want to fight, and you're handed a Kalashnikov. I mean, we've been witnessing just around us people handing out guns, people who've got no idea how a gun operates, playing around with it, putting the magazine on, putting the magazine off, firing in every direction at all. There is this huge lack of discipline. On the other hand, there is this zeal, this fervour to be part of the battle to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. So morale is extremely high. And although in geographical terms, the rebels do appear to be facing something of a setback right now, it's not having any dent at all on their morale and their determination to keep fighting. In fact, people are still turning up here and volunteering. It seems, though, that at the moment it's just a problem of tactics and the strategy on the ground, and indeed whether the pro-Gaddafi forces have decided that this is as far as they're going to let the rebels continue by ground. So at the moment we seem to be in a bit of a holding pattern, but as I said, new recruits, new volunteers for the rebel force turning up all the time.
Jackie Rowland live in Brega for us in Libya. Thank you, Jackie. So as Jackie says, and Hoda before her as well, it seems neither the rebels nor the pro-Gaddafi forces really have the upper hand, which begs the question, does either side have the firepower and the will to win? Lawrence Lee looks at that.
Whatever the military capabilities of the opponents of Gaddafi's regime, they certainly don't lack spirit. This is the city of Misrata, which on Sunday morning the government in Tripoli said had been reclaimed by pro-Gaddafi forces. It certainly doesn't look like it now. By the end of Sunday, the government was trying to suggest something different, that they've made a conscious decision not to cause too much death and destruction.
One of the brigades took the repositioned and didn't want to engage in the fighting. And despite that, the locals managed to capture 37 of the militia groups.
Despite Gaddafi's obvious advantage of having aircraft and helicopters, one of the striking aspects of this conflict has been how inaccurate the bombing has been. While it's true that some weapons dumps have been destroyed, in many places the warplanes have continuously missed their targets, and now and again are even shot down by aging men who freely admit to having never manned an anti-aircraft gun in their entire life before this. It all raises intriguing questions. Are Gaddafi's pilots incapable of shooting straight? Are they missing targets on purpose? And if so, is it because they don't want to hit them, or is it because they're under orders to frighten rather than kill?
When we arrived, we didn't find any opposition because the people here are good. The people welcome us and greet us. But when we were inside, 2 Mirage planes overflew us and 1 helicopter. They wanted to shoot, but we shot them first.
All the same, if there are questions over the capabilities and the will of the Libyan military, the same can perhaps be said of Gaddafi's opponents. While there's no shortage of revolutionary zeal on the front line, the advance towards Sirte appears extremely badly organised. It appears voices are starting to emerge from Benghazi too, questioning military tactics. There's also the separate issue of whether civilian supporters of Gaddafi in places like Sirte or Tripoli are prepared to arm themselves against a rebel advance, and if so, what that would mean for either side's moral authority. If you add it all together, it suggests a conflict which could destroy this country. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera.
We talked about Misrata at the start of this bulletin. It's east of Tripoli, the scene of more fighting. A city where the opposition National Council is trying to establish its presence. A little earlier, Imran Gowda spoke to Mohammed Ali, a member of the Council's Civil Committee for Misrata Affairs. Asked him how the rebels were going to continue their fight against the Libyan army.
Our armory is not a lot. What we rely on is willpower and the belief that we want to liberate our country, and the amount of dislike and hate towards the system and the dictator